Most tech consultants are making one massive mistake that's keeping them trapped at a much lower rate, while others are quietly making 500K in the exact same field. I'm going to show you the 4 pricing models every consultant needs to know, and by the end of this video, you'll know exactly which pricing strategy to use at every stage of your career, whether you're in AI, cyber, cloud, whatever. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mansell. I've been in cyber consulting for the last 12 years for all the biggest names. I've lived on 3 continents and scaled multiple businesses to 50K or more without ever needing permanent staff. So let's get into this one. So the first one is time and materials, which is something everybody understands because it's literally just selling your time for money. The only difference is that instead of doing it permanently, you're doing it for a much higher rate as a consultant or a contract consultant. So there are 2 ways to do it. You can either do it by the hour or by the day. By the hour is generally going to be for people who are more beginner. That's not to say that skilled people can't do it. It's just that by the hour is far more transparent for the end client. So when you're starting out as a beginner, they know exactly what they're going to get. And you might be more open to taking on just a few hours and a whole bunch of different projects in a single day. Whereas by the day is the more traditional high value long-term consulting. So you might get a 6-month contract for like $1,000 a day or something like that in cyber or cloud, whatever. Again, not to say that hourly people don't charge super high rates per hour. That does exist in niches outside of tech as well. But just in my neck of the woods, it's usually always been a day rate, even if the back end of the system always looks like hours. There are only really 2 times where you don't want to trade your time for money. The first one is if you're a prostitute in a really bad part of town, it's not going to go in your favor. And 2, if the value that you get out of trading your time for the money isn't actually worth it, then it's completely pointless and you shouldn't be doing it. So obviously these are things that you need to factor into your calculations when you're choosing which one of these pricing models to use. And we'll get into how to do that later. So why is time and materials good? And the first thing is that you don't have any experience. An hourly rate is a good way to get your foot in the door. It's super low friction because you can create an Upwork profile, and you'll see a lot of people in AI doing this. They show off some of their workflows. They might even build a bot to automatically do the outreach for them, and then they sell themselves per hour. So it's a really good way to get into it when you're a beginner. Again, not to say that if you're making $350 an hour, you can't take an hourly rate and take on a bunch of clients. It's just less typical, niche dependent probably. It's also very good for building testimonials. So again, if you don't have a lot of experience, what you need to do fast is get testimonials. So working per hour can really work in your favor, as can a day rate, time and materials. And then third is that it can outweigh value-based pricing if you're earning top rates. So for me, I'm earning really high rates with time and materials. And for a lot of the stuff that I do, it actually outweighs what I would get on a value-based pricing. If you don't understand value-based pricing yet, we'll get into that soon. A lot of people throw shade at time and materials, and I'm not sure why. I think it's because mostly people always say decouple your own time so that you have more freedom to do whatever it is that you want to do. But depending on the type of contract that you're taking and the amount of money that you're getting for that contract, you can still have a bunch of free time and still get paid a super high rate that again can outperform that of value-based pricing. So why is it bad? You're essentially limiting the amount of money that you can make when you eventually do reach a cap. And obviously your time isn't decoupled. So something to say around that is that even though that's entirely true, it's not to say that you can't attach this to another pricing model and actually do 2 things at the same time, which I'll show you very soon. So the faster that you work, the less money you're going to make. And that's entirely true with this because let's say you scope a 3-month project and you're really fast, super efficient, and you do it in a month and a half. That means that you lose a month and a half of billing if you don't know how to upsell or find other problems on site that can make you valuable and keep you extended for that extra month and a half. And again, it depends on the type of company that you're going for. If you're in a large organization, they tend to micromanage you less and actually have less tight deadlines, or they have the illusion of these deadlines, but they never really hit them, in which case your contract just keeps on rolling. So it's less there and more in smaller businesses. But as long as you're keeping the ball in their court, you can actually keep this thing going for quite a while, providing that you are still showing them value at every interval. It's not so that you can exploit them and just sit on your ass all day. And then the third point is that scope creep is real. So you need to shut that thing down immediately. That happens with any pricing model that you use. But with T&M, they think they can get away with a lot more and you have to work free overtime. So just keep that in mind, ideally with every pricing model, to be honest. So when would you use time and materials pricing? And this is when I would use it, how I use it nowadays as well. So I still use it, I just pair it with other things. So my day rate when I was in London was between 1 and 1.5K, which is pretty high for London. And in New York City, it's closer to 2K, which is starting to get closer to the top of what you can get there. Again, niche dependent. So what I started to do is I coupled it with different partnerships and an outsourced team to sell other people without needing to employ them myself. So for instance, I take on a contract, let's just use the terms of $1,000 here for math's sake. So I go on a long-term contract for a year. That's 220 working days. No, that's 240 working days of the year. So times $1,000, that's 240K just from time and materials. And then I would take 2 consultants in DevOps, sell them with a 250 margin per person. That's 500 a day for me doing absolutely nothing. So you can see how quickly that can scale to an extra 120K if they're billable for an entire year, which they are. So that's an easy 360K for not really doing a lot of work. And you can see why it's so powerful when you put 2 different pricing models or working methods together, because you can really scale things quite a lot without ever needing permanent staff or needing anyone to help you with this really, other than strategic partnerships and a really good network and a bunch of friends who want to help you, as long as you're helping them back. So when would you not want to use T&M? And if your client has unlimited budget but tight deadlines, and that's super important because a lot of the smaller places might not have a massive budget and they have a really tight deadline, in which case that's not really lucrative either. But tight deadlines aren't good for this, because if someone has a high budget, you want to make sure that you're on a longer term project, because then you can get more of that budget. But if they have super tight deadlines, it might be better to go down with something where you're going to be spending less of your time and still get the exact same amount of money from it. So that would be something like value-based pricing. The second one is if you work super fast and there's no future work opportunity. So like I explained, if you scope something for 3 months and you think you're actually going to do it in a month and a half and there's no more opportunity on site, probably better to go with value-based pricing. And if you're dealing with senior execs who think in outcomes only, so a lot of people might say to you, we don't want T&M, we just want you to automate our sales team, in which case you don't really have a choice there because they're telling you exactly what they want. So second up, we get into productized services, and this is a really cool thing if you have something that you can package up and sell. So essentially all it is you packaging up your expertise into repeatable, standardized offerings. If we go off the example here of a cloud security audit, you sell it for £2,500 and you deliver it across a single day, and you just give them this repeatable thing. So it might be, let's just say, a script that automates an entire build for an entire deployment of Kubernetes or something like that. You could sell that because it's a repeatable system that people can use over and over again. They might choose a few variables like how many nodes they want, and this is what my network looks like. Put in all of those tiny variables and then they're good to go. So that would be you taking your expertise in cloud, packaging it up and selling it to a bunch of people. And then you can still attach T&M onto that, which is super valuable, as I mentioned in the previous slide, when you start to add things together. I have a friend who did just this. He did it with a Splunk tool and he's making a ton of money in it. So why it's good? Because you've solved the same problem 20 times and now you can pretty much do it blindfolded. And when you get to that stage, again, then you can turn your information into a product. So higher margins because you eliminate any unknowns. Again, because you've done this so many times, you've found all of the problems that can be there and you don't need to actually be on site in order to solve these problems because they won't necessarily come up. And you can also scale without adding more of your time. So the faster that someone can implement this themselves, you might not even need to be there and you could just offer some form of support afterwards, which again is another form of pricing called retainer, which we'll get into in step 4. So why it's bad? It only works if you can genuinely standardize the process. If this is something that is going to constantly need tinkering, it doesn't really work. Enterprise clients often want to feel special and unique. That is entirely true. But only if your thing isn't such an awesome product that solves such a badass problem for them, then they can feel special because they have this thing that buys back a whole bunch of their time and money and effort. And then point 3, some problems are just too complex to productize. And that's entirely true. So if you're in that niche, then unfortunately you can't go down that route, but you could sell something else like your expertise, which is the knowledge in your head, and you change that to a transformation, which is what I'm doing. So if I'm looking to productize my services, this is when I would use it and when I am currently using it. So I'm currently using it with my community where I'm selling a transformation where I'm helping people who might be stuck in corporate jobs or anywhere where they are underpaid and undervalued and they want to get to a point where they can earn 6 figures in consulting, and they have a step-by-step plan on how to get there, plus my support and direct time. I swear this isn't advertising. The link's in the description below though. And you can see why this would be super lucrative because it all ties into the ecosystem that I'm doing. So I started as an immigrant with no degree, no experience, leaving South Africa, going to London, had literally nothing, and then built myself up to where I am now, traveling the world, blah, 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 blah. So I've learned a lot on that journey, and I really hate scripting. I hate coding. I'm not very good at it. I could probably do it with AI now. But the point being is that when I was looking at a product to sell to decouple my time from something, and move it towards something more meaningful, because I don't really just want to help machines, and I'd much rather help people make more money. So I decided to productize my knowledge into a transformational course that offers mentorship. So again, it doesn't have to be a technical skill that you're transferring. It can be any skill that you have that you can productize that helps people. And another way that this turns into another product is, after I've helped these people and they're awesome consultants, I can then refer them to find work through my partner network, because my partners all need consultants, and that's what I regularly do with other people that I have in my network. So you can see how it all cascades and turns into things where we can all help one another. So the TLDR is basically that whenever you can build a tool that can solve someone else's problem and it doesn't need much of your time, that's when you're going to be using it. When it doesn't work is when clients want heavy customization. As I mentioned, it's not really going to work that way unless you have some kind of junior dev that you attach to the product that you're doing, and their time is far less valuable than your time, and you just sell them as part of that, perhaps on a retainer. And that brings us smoothly into point 3, which is the retainer model. So what is it? You charge a fixed monthly fee for ongoing access to your brain. You're essentially some kind of fractional CTO or strategic advisor, whatever. And you charge X amount of money for 2 or 3 days of your time, and within that, it could even just be a few hours a week of your time. Obviously, you can play around with that. It's really good because it gives you predictable income that you can count on. You know that, okay, cool, these guys have hired me on a retainer for 6 months, and I'm going to get X amount of money as long as I deliver on X, Y, Z during the calls that we have. It also builds deeper relationships. So the more referrals that you have, this is obviously going to be way better for you, because you can just keep offering retainers. But the better that you are at this, the more people are going to refer you. So they kind of tie in with one another. And it's also good because it's a super premium positioning. You're now a strategic advisor or strategic partner, however you want to label it. And that can really help position you as the super premium person that people want. So it can also be bad because you need a proven track record. So if you're just starting out and you don't have the social proof behind you, you can't really offer this fractional path. You can offer support retainership, which, you're selling this automation, and then 6 months you're going to give them free maintenance, upgrade, and support. You can use that as a retainer, but if you're going down this fractional route, you can't really do that unless you've got a proof of record. So the next thing is that the client needs ongoing value, not just one-time fixes. So you can't just rock up on a call when they only have 2 hours of your time for the day and say, I need to actually look into this and blah, 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 because then they're not getting value out of that 2 hours that you're actually giving to them. So you need to make sure that you come prepared to every call that you're going on, and that you do actually know what you're talking about. So it's a lot more pressure for you at the same time. And some people can think this becomes boring. So because you're doing essentially the same thing for like 5 or 10 clients, it can become boring. For me, I've always focused on the outcome, which was money, which brings me freedom, which lets me do what I want, like provide for my family and travel and help people, whatever. So I focus on that as opposed to how boring work can be, because anything that you do that isn't like your favorite hobby or your favorite passion, it's going to be pretty boring unless you can find ways to make it exciting. So for me, I don't pay attention to that. Now, when would you use a retainer? So selling support as part of an automation, like I said already, or a strategic advisory as part of your offering. Pretty straightforward. And again, it doesn't work if you don't have that proven track record, or if your product or thing doesn't actually need any aftercare. So pointless trying to sell it if you have this perfect system that doesn't actually need you afterwards. And that brings us into point 4, which is value-based pricing. And a lot of people are harping on about this at the moment because it's super lucrative, especially in AI, where people are either, they have a few clients and they're trying to get more money out of what they're doing as opposed to T&M. So it can work that way, but sometimes T&M can still be more lucrative, as you'll soon see. So what is it? You charge 10 to 20% of the measurable value that you create for the client. And this is why people think it's the holy grail in some eyes. So you can charge 100K for 2 weeks of work if the value is there. You're finally rewarded for your expertise, not your time. So you've now decoupled your time from your money. And clients love it because the ROI is pretty obvious. It's kind of like fixed price contracting, like, I want my kitchen done for 20K. Except in this case, the person who came in to do your kitchen, they would have sold you on the idea of how amazing your new kitchen is going to be, how much cooking time it's going to save you, and all of that shit. You're basically just attaching all this massive value to the problem is that they're going to solve. And we'll get into this in depth in a little bit. So why is it bad? Because the client needs to share their actual financial data in some cases. If you wanted to show a return on ROI that was specifically tailored towards some of their money, you would actually need to understand what they're spending and all of those things. And some people don't want to share that with you, as funny as it may sound. So you really need to quantify specific outcomes. You need to be able to do that. It doesn't only need to be based on money. It can be based on how much time you're saving their team and things like that. But you really do need to show them that they're getting a return on investment. Otherwise, you obviously can't show them the value. So it doesn't work for discovery work where you don't know what you're going to find. If you can't speak to a bunch of people and actually find this ROI, it's not going to work. So when would I use it? When I have testimonials and proof of previous value. That's pretty obvious. If you don't have any of this, they don't know that they can trust you to provide this value to them. So you need to make sure that you have that. But I would also use it when automation eliminates 2 roles. So let's just say that you're going to increase their revenue by X amount of money and you're going to save them £80,000 worth of time. You're going to charge a certain percentage of that £80,000. So I really want to take just a little bit of a deep dive in on the value here, because a lot of people don't understand the concept of value-based pricing. Some people think, why the hell would someone pay this amount of money for me doing a week's work? And we'll get into an example of the why soon. First, I want to look at how to calculate the value. And these are key areas that you need to identify and quantify in order for you to show value to clients. So the first thing is obvious, it's cost savings. You help them reduce their hosting fees, you eliminate roles, you make them have fewer errors, and that helps them reduce their costs. There are obviously a ton of things that you can do. These are just a few of them. The next one is revenue increases. So you have a faster site, better uptime, new capabilities. You automate their sales team so that they get people in front of them a lot faster. You do lead gen research, all of that stuff is automated. Very popular in AI at the moment. And it's also easy to show a return on value for that. Risk mitigation. So you avoid breaches, you help them get to their compliance faster, you avoid their downtime. You can see by doing those things, you can also couple them with revenue increases or cost savings, because when you have less downtime, you obviously save a bunch of money, and you can also increase your sales as opposed to competitors who have more downtime than you. So these things all kind of piggyback on one another, and you can see how you can increase the value. Then you have time or effort savings, where you have hours freed up times the cost per hour per person on the team. So if you have a sales team of 10 people and you save 2 hours a day for them, you can see how much money you're actually saving for that sales team by decoupling their time from the system. Again, super popular with AI at the moment. So when you want to calculate your value percentage, there are 3 options that you can choose. And obviously these are just guidelines, but you would start off conservatively, which is 10% of the value that you generate. If you don't have a lot of proof of value, you might want to use this, and you can still use your T&M experience here when you're trying to showcase that value. It's not like that stuff doesn't count anymore. The standard is 15% of the annual value generated, and premium would be considered around about 20%, but you need to have an amazing perception of value in order to obviously get this kind of thing. Or you might want to be solving niche problems in a low saturated market, in which case you're going to look even more premium. The point being is that depending on which one of these numbers you want to attach to it is entirely up to you. It's not like there is this thing and you have to do it and follow it. If you can make people believe that you are premium, you can command this 20% fee. You could probably even ask for even more if you're super premium. It just comes down to how well you play on people's perceptions, like I mentioned in another video. So the mental block that you might be having around this, and I certainly had it when I was starting out a while ago, was that when you see a 90K project, your brain immediately says, that's only 7 days of work for me. I could do that in my sleep. How can 7 days be worth 90K? And that's employee thinking, because we spent a lot of our lives going in there working by hours. So we've attached output to the number of hours that we've worked as opposed to the value that we're delivering for a person. And you're not charging 90K for 7 days of work. You're charging 90K for your number of years of experience, the guaranteed outcome, the speed to result, risk elimination, and any strategic guidance that you're giving. So don't conflate your cost to deliver with their received value. So before we get into what model to use and when, I just want to give you a quick example of value-based pricing that I actually went into as opposed to used. So I bought an 8K course where I really wanted the outcome on. And you might be asking yourself, why the hell would anyone spend 8K on a course? And it's because I valued the outcome. I wanted to understand exactly how to build a business and do a bunch of stuff around course and community stuff without doing it myself. So I calculated my potential return on investment from this course, the amount of time it would take me to figure out this information myself, and then I went ahead and I bought it, because the time it would have taken me to do all of that would have been way longer. I just wanted someone to give me step-by-step instructions, use this website, use this tool, do this thing, and you'll get exactly what you want. Saves you a bunch of money in the long run. So the course creator, when they're thinking to create this course, there's no way that they would have based their pricing on how long it took them to record the videos, their hosting costs, and their time to edit. Maybe to some degree they would factor that in, but that's not what influenced their pricing to the point where they decided that it was worth 8K. It was worth 8K because they knew the value to someone in my position, someone my age, someone with the amount of money that I'm earning, someone with the amount of money that I do want to earn. They knew how valuable it would be to me and what being in the position where their transformation would lead me to would ultimately get me. So that's the kind of brain that you need to have when you're trying to approach clients with value-based stuff. So when we're looking at what model to use and when, there are a few universal rules that apply to all roles, because a lot of people say, well, I'm a beginner, what should I do? Or I've been doing this for 5 years, what should I do? And I think it's a bit silly when you're getting into like mid-level to the expensive tier of things to kind of differentiate yourself, because realistically, if you're able to manipulate perception really well, even if you're a beginner, you can charge super high prices if you've made yourself look premium. So there are a few universal rules that apply to this as opposed to just your seniority and your experience level. And the first thing when you're trying to choose a pricing model is to obviously just use maths. So is the value price that you're going to charge someone worth more than your T&M? For me right now, value price doesn't really make a whole bunch of sense because I'm getting like 1,500 to 2,000 a day for my time, plus I have it coupled with other things. For me to quote value priced, I'm going to have to find a massive problem for a company to solve to make that more valuable than either a 6-month or 1-year contract that I have with T&M. So it's really simple maths. If someone offers you a 6-month contract and you're charging $1,000 a day, that's X amount of money. Can you find enough value within their business to then charge 10% or 20% of that would equate to you working less time and getting the same amount or more money than you would with T&M over 6 months? So simple maths will help you get there. And again, this is why I think a lot of people, especially now in AI, they're going down this route of value-based and they don't really understand T&M yet because they've only been doing actual work for a year. I mean, some of them are like 19 and they don't understand these 6-month to 1-year contracts because AI hasn't reached a point where it's gone down this conventional consulting route where a cyber architect might go into an organization for up to a year, and big companies have deeper pockets and they're just saying like, yeah, we need an architect for a year, just bring him in, without really understanding their requirements. In AI, it's more like we need someone to automate our sales team. So when you jump on the call, the client already knows what they want. They want their sales team automated. They don't need this person, oh yeah, let's just bring in an AI guy for a year to help us embed AI in all possible arenas in our organization. That surely does happen, but it's not as common as more conventional stuff yet. So then the next one is to use critical thinking. This is the second universal rule. And you need to ask yourself, will accepting a certain model now lead to more valuable opportunities later? So an example of that would be if you take 25K value-based project now to get into an enterprise and then pitch a long-term fractional or T&M for X amount later on, would that actually work out better for you than trying to charge more up front? Then another example of this would be a free trial. So again, can you get a client to an MVP as fast as possible and maybe even for free? The benefit of doing that would be that you can beat any other people trying to get in on this client without negotiating prices. So a lot of people do this race to the bottom thing where they just try to go cheaper than the person trying to get in. But another thing that you could do is what I just said and build something really cool for these people for free if it doesn't take a shitload of time, and give it to them to show them how valuable you are. And then you never need to speak about negotiating on price because they've already seen your value. They know that you're good. So that if they do say, oh, well, you know, these guys are going to do it for $100 cheaper, you just say, well, you know, look, this is the value that I can provide. I'm not trying to negotiate on price here. I'm going in with my value. So it's a really good way to get yourself in the door ahead of competitors as well, or just thinking critically and saying, okay, if I give a little bit away now, how much more am I going to get later on? Then the next thing is to use your opportunity. Can you use more than one thing at the same time? And that's what I do. So retainer and productized add-ons, can you mix T&M with value-based or a product, something like that? And if you can't think of something to do, I mean, AI is around. So just say, this is what I'm doing. This is my niche. This is any product that I might have or don't have. Can you give me examples of a product that I could offer these people? Can you come up with a retainer model for me? It's really simple to put these things together nowadays. Another example of an opportunity would be, can you do like day rate discovery and then do value-based for the implementation? Can you do free discovery and then value-based for the implementation or T&M? So you can see how these universal rules can apply to any level that you are, whether you're a beginner or a mid or a pro, whatever. These apply anywhere because you're always going to be using these models when you're going across doing your consulting gigs. But there are a few things that you can do when you're just starting out. So if I was just starting out and I'm looking at pricing, let's just say that you have no clients, you have no experience, and you have no network. That changes things drastically compared to someone who has all of those things. So if you don't have those things, you need to focus on getting them first. That would be your highest output. You might want to work for free. You might want to do low paid work. Again, that's what I did when I was starting out, no degree, no experience, and an immigrant. I would literally do whatever the fuck I had to do to get me where I wanted to go. I don't care. I will work for free. I will work for minimum wage. I did all of those things. I took a whole bunch of risks. You can find out my whole journey in another video, but I basically did what I had to get me where I wanted to go. And that's been kind of like my baseline point for most of the work that I've been doing. I never thought about, oh, this person's underpaying me, blah, blah, blah. I just thought, okay, this is where I want to get to, so I'm going to do this thing. And when I get to that stage, then I'll start asking for more. And eventually you get to a stage where you demand more because of your expertise. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. Now, it might also be on Upwork. So when you're just starting out, let's say you don't have a lot of experience and you don't have clients. Upwork is a really reputable place right now, especially for people in AI. There's a ton of people in AI currently on Upwork, and they're automating their profiles, they're automating their outreach. So you can get all of that set up really fast. And one problem with it though is that there is a ton of saturation at the moment. So if you're not really good at making yourself look like the best product on the market, it can be quite challenging. But again, if you've got no other options and nothing to lose, focus yourself on trying to get in front of these people over those people. Because wherever you are, there's going to be competition. So that's probably where I would start. If I had absolutely nothing, I'd start on Upwork. Or if I had maybe 1 or 2 friends, I would definitely ask my friends first. I have a video on how to find your first client if you're unsure how to do that. So when you start having more options, that's when pricing changes a lot, and we can really play around with a whole bunch of these pricing models that I've already spoken about. But one of the things that you're always going to focus on, no matter what tier you're in, when you have, let's say you've got 1 or 2 clients and you start moving up in the food chain, you really want to focus on manipulating perception in your favor towards premium as fast as possible in a market with high demand. So again, if there's no demand, it doesn't matter how amazing you look, no one's going to want to buy you. But the faster that you can manipulate people's perception in your favor, the more you're going to get from or out of people. And it's super important that you nail that as soon as you have some client testimonials or you start getting your network and your brand is starting to get recognized. You really need to focus on this. Partnerships, referrals, those sort of things. I pretty much rely on referrals and partnerships over and over again. I've been doing that for like 8 years now, since I've started the contract consulting thing, and I built my network from the first 4 years of really grinding in consulting. So another thing is that you never want to price yourself below other people to get clients at this stage. Again, I spoke about that already, because it's a race to the bottom and that lowers your perceived value. And you definitely don't want to be in that position when you're in a position where you've already got some client testimonials, referrals, and partnerships. That's just silly. Why would you want to do that? For T&M, you want to find out what the market pays you and then pick the highest price you can get based on your current status. So again, if I don't know how to price myself for T&M, like let's just say the market says $550 a day to $1,000 a day, I'm never going to choose the bottom rate. I did that when I started out, and what actually happened was, after my first year of doing $550 a day, the partner that I was working with, they actually said, when I asked for a raise, the partner actually said, you priced yourself really low when you started out. Now, obviously, that was good for them because they were making a higher margin on me. And they're not necessarily going to tell me that off the bat, not because they're bad people, just because everybody wants to make money. But they did tell me that I priced myself too low. And then as soon as I did that, I realized I probably had no confidence when I was going into this, and I just maybe wanted to get my first client and all of that stuff. But the point is that I didn't even try and start off with $650, which I probably could easily have done. In worst case scenario, we just negotiate down, probably even still higher than $550, and end up somewhere at $600. The point being, don't settle for the voice in your head saying, we're only worth $550. Try for something stupidly high and just negotiate your way down when you're trying to figure out your T&M. Again, don't make it something stupid that's so way out of market value, like $3K a day, when you've only just had 2 years of experience, because obviously that's not going to work in your favor. And with AI, you can easily show off your value now. So if you're into AI automation and all of that stuff, it's one of the easiest ways to show your value to clients, because you can build out a problem that solves their problem before they even know that they have a whole bunch of problems. Generally, sales teams tend to have the same kind of problems, which is why it's predictable, which is why you can automate it, and why you can just build a really cool tool that shows them a whole bunch of value before you've even gotten there. This is something that I'm actually working on now. I'm working on an AI project where I'm going to be presenting this to a sales team, to automate their entire sales team. So I just built a simple automation to show them a whole bunch of value. And again, trying to calculate whether value-based is going to be more valuable to me as opposed to T&M on this. So these kind of things are really going to help you when you're trying to price yourself. And again, it shouldn't be entirely based on your experience. Of course, you can get away with things regardless of your experience, and you should try and do those things as long as you can back up what you're trying to sell to people, because nothing is going to destroy your perception or your brand more than if you tell people all of these promises and then you can't deliver on those promises. So just keep that in mind. On the screen right now is a video where you can find your first client without a massive network, and exactly how I did it. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.